Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we are continuing on with Punk's Not Dead by wrunic, and we are reading Chapter 5. Monday night had been, to severely understate the situation, tense. So by the time Katsuki got to school on Tuesday morning, he was somehow even more tired than he'd been before he'd gone home yesterday. The situation was not helped by the fact that Half and Half was lingering by his desk, clearly waiting for him. Katsuki briefly entertained logistics of just saying fuck it and going home, but having to explain his decision to skip to his mother was literally the only scenario he could imagine that was worse than whatever the fuck was going on here. Besides, he wasn't a goddamn coward.
What the hell do you want?
Good morning, Bakugou. Katsuki rolled his eyes and shouldered past Half and Half so he could sit down. The asshole hadn't even bothered with greetings before, so it was clearly just to infuriate him. And goddamn if it wasn't working.
Cut the bullshit, or you can fuck off,
Katsuki snapped. Half and Half didn't react because he was a pain in the ass like that. I just wanted to let you know that I saw what happened on Saturday. Katsuki looked up from his books he'd been sitting out to glare at him.
Are you planning on fucking blackmailing me or something?
Half and Half looked confused. No, I was volunteering my services as a witness if you needed another one.
Why the fuck didn't you say something yesterday? Or, I don't know, when the fuck it happened?
Katsuki snarled, earning a few concerned looks from their classmates. Fuck them. I thought it was an accident until Uraraka brought it up at lunch yesterday. She seemed to have it under control when it happened, and you aren't very receptive to outside help. His expression never changed, but Katsuki could hear the undertone of accusation in his voice. I didn't have a chance to speak to you after I found out the truth until now. Once he was done speaking, Katsuki let the silence sit for a few moments, thinking. If he was alone in this, he would have told Half and Half to go fuck himself, stuck with Uraraka as his only witness, and left it at that. Unfortunately, he had Kirishima and his gaggle of idiots to consider now. He was still tempted to kick Half and Half to the curb on principle, but he kept thinking about Aizawa's fucking binder, bursting at the seams with the bullshit Kirishima and co. had been dealing with since their first year, and the resigned looks on their faces when they saw the graffiti on their table.
Stay here for lunch today. Bring the rest of your nerds, too. I know you're going to tell them anyway. I'd rather they find shit out firsthand.
Half and Half nodded, then headed back to his desk. Katsuki's eyes tracked him, mostly accidentally, which is how he got a view of Deku, looking between him and Half with a particular scheming glint in his eyes that he got whenever he was trying to figure something out. Their gazes caught by mistake, Katsuki sneered at him, and he backed off. Good. Katsuki was going to have to fucking deal with him at lunch today already. That was plenty. Time passes. Staying at his desk when lunch started and watching as the rest of the class emptied out was normal. Kirishima, Ashido, Kaminari, and Sero all showing up a few minutes later, all talking and jostling each other around, was normal. The way they trailed off into awkward silence when they noticed there were 4 other people awkwardly gathered by Katsuki's desk was not. There was a brief sort of standoff where both groups studied each other uneasily. Katsuki sure as hell wasn't going to do anything about that, which was why it was probably a good thing that Uraraka arrived when she did, bursting through the door with a, "So sorry I'm late, I got Ida's message right at the start of lunch and then I had to use the microwave in the caf and..." She took in the tense atmosphere and drifted into silence for a second, then continued on like she could dissolve it by sheer force of cheeriness. "And the line was ridiculously long. They should really invest in more microwaves, especially for such a big school, right, Bakugou?" She said the last part as she dropped down at the desk behind him, which was, miraculously, not one of the seats regularly taken by his usual lunch group. Katsuki grunted a vague affirmation, and the weird mood dissipated. Kirishima and his friends took their usual spots, and Deku, Four Eyes, Half and Frog found places nearby. Once everyone was settled, introductions started, which Katsuki tuned out because everyone already knew who he was, and he knew all of them already. This wasn't by choice, of course. He didn't know a single one of his classmates' names outside of them and Yaoyorozu, and he only knew her name because she constantly came close to him on exam scores, and he needed to know her name to properly motivate himself to crush her. No, the reason that knowledge was forcefully etched into his brain was because Uraraka was friends with them and she insisted on talking about them to him sometimes, especially when she was crushing on one of them, which had happened somehow for every single person in her friend group, except half and half. Katsuki thought this was ridiculous because even though he was a gigantic pain in the ass, and Katsuki wanted to kill him, it was an objective fact that he was the best-looking member of Deku's little posse.
"I'm almost afraid to ask," Frog said a few minutes later, "but why are we all here?"
Four Eyes nodded in agreement. I was wondering the same thing. Uraraka and Kirishima both gave Katsuki simultaneous expectant looks. He gave the quickest possible telling of Saturday's events, along with everything that had happened during yesterday's lunch.
"Well,"
Deku said when he'd finished, "I think that Uraraka and Todoroki collaborating your story, you're in a pretty good position, especially since he's going after you unprovoked." Yeah, about that," Sero said, wincing. "We may have kind of
spray painted a floral patterned curse word on his windshield,"
Ashido finished. "In our defense, it looks fucking sick," Kaminari added with forced cheer after a few seconds of heavy silence. Kirishima gave the assembled group a very forced smile. "Well, that certainly doesn't help your case," Four Eyes said, pinching the bridge of his nose.
"I get where you're coming from, Ida, but physical assault is definitely worse than vandalism,"
Deku said with conviction. It was at this point that it really hit Katsuki how fucked up his life had gotten, because he was actually agreeing with Deku about something. "I don't mean to imply they're equal crimes. Unfortunately, since the administration seems to favor Monoma over Kirishima, Ashido, Kaminari, and Sero, this gives him an angle. A way to twist the story to make himself into a victim." Four Eyes replied grimly. "Shit," Kaminari sighed. "He's got a point."
"So what if he does?"
Katsuki exclaimed.
"Nothing was going to get fixed by admin anyway. Better vigilante justice than nothing."
"How likely is it that something like this happens again?"
Frog asked, ignoring Katsuki's outburst. Kirishima huffed a tired half-laugh. "Basically guaranteed." Frog tapped her chin pensively.
"Why not wait it out? You're at an impasse here. Monoma can't say anything about the graffiti because he'd have to admit to attacking Bakugou. And if you press this, he'll just bring up the graffiti and nothing will happen. It isn't ideal, but if you accumulate more evidence..."
"Fuck this!"
Katsuki snapped, standing up so abruptly he knocked over his chair.
"I'm not in the fucking mood to sit around and wait for someone to attack me again if I can do something about it."
"Bakugou," Uraraka started.
"No, I've been dealing with this shit for a week and I'm already fucking sick of it. It's been happening to them for 3 fucking years, so no more fucking waiting. I don't care if I have to kill Mona myself. I want this shit over with."
The silence after Katsuki finished yelling was, even by the standards of the many that had preceded it during that lunch period, uncomfortable. Kirishima was the first to react, standing from his own desk and grabbing Katsuki's elbow. "Excuse us a minute," he said with a forced smile, frog marching Katsuki out of the classroom and into the hallway.
"I stand by everything, shitty hair,"
Katsuki snarled as soon as Kirishima closed the door. Kirishima sighed. "You don't think I'm fucking frustrated? Of course I am. Helping Hanta with the car this morning was the most cathartic thing I've done in weeks. But Asui's right. We're at an impasse."
"But..."
"No! Listen to me," Kirishima said firmly, cutting Katsuki off. He had a look in his eyes that Katsuki had never seen before, a hard-set, burning determination. Monon's getting bold, but he's getting sloppy. If we give it time, we'll have concrete proof and we can force Yue's hand. Katsuki opened his mouth to try and speak, but Kirishima continued, tightening his grip on Katsuki's arm. I'm not done. We can get as much petty vengeance on Monoma as we want, but it's not going to fucking help. The graffiti might ruin his day, but he can afford to have his car repaired. Hell, he can probably afford a new fucking car. But if we manage to prove that he's been doing all of this, we might be able to get him expelled from UA, or at the very least, force the administration to admit that they were wrong and be better. If we do this, we can change the whole system and make sure that next time a Monoma comes around, the school has no way to weasel out of doing something about it. Okay? Katsuki stood in stunned silence for a few seconds while Kirishima loosened his grip on his arm.
Yeah, fine.
Good, come on. Kirishima led him back inside and Katsuki followed without resisting, dazed until he was back in his seat. We'll do it, Kirishima told the assembled group. Deku's eyes widened comically, and Uraraka blatantly stared at Kirishima in complete disbelief.
We'll help in whatever way we can,
Four Eyes declared solemnly, and the rest of the group nodded in agreement. Just so we're clear, Half and Half said, you don't actually need me to do anything?
Nope, Ashido chirped. Not yet, anyway. We'll let you know when we do.
Half and Half nodded and turned his attention back to his lunch. That seemed to remind the rest of the assembly that this was, technically, their lunch period, and that they should probably get some food in them before class resumed. The remaining time was passed mostly in silence while everyone focused on eating, with only occasional splashes of conversation here and there. Katsuki didn't participate in any of them, partially on principle and partially because he was trying to figure out why the fuck his heart rate hadn't gone down since Kirishima had lectured him in the hallway. Time passes. Compared to the chaotic shitstorm that was Tuesday, Wednesday was almost unsettlingly uneventful. Frog, Four Eyes, and Half seemed to have taken their little chat as an invitation to acknowledge him in public, which it absolutely fucking wasn't, but they didn't do much more than nod at him. Deku, for once, had the good sense and survival skills to keep his distance, so Katsuki let it slide. It was fucking annoying, but it was better than having frozen chemicals thrown at him, so fucking be it. Thursday was also shaping up to be normal until lunch, when Kirishima nudged Katsuki's leg under his desk to make him look up from his food and asked, Do you want me to drive you straight from school on Friday? Before Katsuki even had a chance to respond, Ashido locked in on them, some kind of drama-seeking missile in too much eyeliner.
What's happening Friday?
She asked. Kaminari, apparently sensing a chance to be involved, joined in. He wiggled his eyebrows suggestively at them.
Hot date?
I'm having dinner with his family, you fucking creeps.
Katsuki snapped, realizing his mistake a second too late when he noticed Kirishima wincing.
You're what?
Ashido shrieked, nearly sending her lunch flying in her haste to get up and jab a finger in Bakugou's face.
I just fucking told you, raccoon eyes. Do you need me to sound it out?
Hanta, Kirishima said desperately. How's your lunch? How's not torturing your best bud? Nice try. I like watching you suffer as much as they do, Sero said smoothly. Kirishima gave him a deeply betrayed look, which Sero acknowledged with only a shrug. It's a good sturdy color. Your face ends up matching your hair.
You're dodging the question,
Ashido said, shifting her accusatory finger from Katsuki to Kirishima. Sero backed off, hands raised, leaving Kirishima completely at her mercy. Look, my mom's found out we're dating and they wanted to meet him. That's it, Kirishima said. Ashido squinted suspiciously at him, but seemed willing to let it go at that. Kaminari, however, started laughing uncontrollably.
Holy shit, he wheezed. Sayuri's gonna eat him alive.
Guys, Kirishima protested, she's not that bad. Sero shook his head. No, she is. Remember in first year when she found out that our health class curriculum was like, and decided to do an LGBT exclusive sex ed for us? Kirishima slumped forward onto the desk and buried his face in his arms, groaning. We agreed never to speak of that. It was actually very helpful, Kaminari said, completely ignoring Kirishima's continued efforts to vanish into the desk. And Yuka's chill. That got nods of agreement from Sero and Ashido. Be nice to Toshiko, Ashido added, or as nice as you can get, I guess. Katsuki nodded, unconcerned. He could be polite when he wanted to, and Kirishima seemed irrationally nervous about this, so Katsuki figured he could try.
Stop trying to hide in your desk, you big baby, he said, kicking Kirishima sharply in the shin. It's unmanly. That got Kirishima to sit up and earned a horrified gasp from Kaminari. He used the U word, he hissed, grabbing onto Ashido's arm for support. Kirishima gave Katsuki a look that could best be described as a pout, which earned him an eye roll and another kick. So, Bakugou, Sero said, drawing his attention away from Kirishima. Any chance you can explain what the fuck a logarithm is? Katsuki spent the rest of lunch trying to yell basic math into their brains. Time passes. Kirishima showed up at his locker after school on Friday, backpack in hand. Ready to go? Yup,
Katsuki said, forcing his locker to shut and swinging his bag over his shoulder. His mother always told him he was going to get back problems if he didn't start wearing it properly, but it wasn't like she was here to stop him. Do you want to stop by your house to change? Katsuki thought about it for a second, then shook his head. His mom knew what Kirishima's car looked like now, and coming home only to leave the house with him definitely wasn't going to fly, especially since he hadn't told her about today. All right then. Kirishima hooked their pinkies together and walked off towards the parking lot.
How'd you end up with a car anyway?
Katsuki asked. Once they reached it and Kirishima was working on getting the doors unlocked. He'd never really thought about it, but Kirishima driving to school every day was pretty unusual. U8 was easy to get to by public transit, and Kirishima's work was within walking distance. Well, it used to be Yuka's, but she works from home now, and she doesn't need it. I have to be at school for practice at 7, and the trains near my house don't start running until 7:30, so I got the car, Kirishima explained, climbing into the driver's side and starting the ignition. Fuck, practice. Jiu-jitsu practice. He'd completely forgotten Uraraka's request way back when this all started.
Uraraka says you have to still spar with her after we break up,
Katsuki said, and Kirishima nearly stalled the car in surprise.
Jesus Christ, shitty hair, who gave you your fucking license?
Uraraka knows? Oh shit.
Fuck, yeah, she was the first person I told about, my mom and shit,
Katsuki said.
I should have told you, sorry.
Kirishima seemed to have gotten himself under control and let out a short laugh. It's fine, I was just surprised. Katsuki snorted.
Yeah, no shit.
In my defense, I didn't even know you and Uraraka were friends. You never talked to her at school. Katsuki shrugged.
I like her, not the rest of her friends. I hang out with her outside of school.
Oh, Kirishima replied. He sounded a little off, though Katsuki couldn't fathom why. Anyway, I'll definitely keep sparring with her afterwards. She's awesome.
You sound weird,
Katsuki snapped. He'd gotten the confirmation for Uraraka. He could afford to be an asshole now.
Spit it out.
I'm just... Kirishima trailed off. Is she, okay with this? Us pretending to date?
She's bi, asshole. It's not like she's homophobic.
Kirishima laughed, almost desperately. So not what I was getting at, but good to know. I meant more, is she cool with you pretending to date someone at all? Katsuki spent a few seconds trying to detangle whatever the fuck Kirishima was avoiding saying, then sighed loudly.
Fucking Christ, not you too.
I just wanted to be sure, Kirishima exclaimed defensively.
I'm not even attracted to women.
Katsuki yelled back. Okay, Kirishima said, fixing his eyes on the road in a way that suggested he really wanted this conversation to be over. They lapsed into silence for a few seconds until Kirishima's curiosity won the battle for dominance with his embarrassment, and he asked, So, if you aren't attracted to girls...
Guys, theoretically.
Katsuki replied, opting to put Kirishima out of his misery. Kirishima nodded awkwardly. Theoretically?
Hasn't happened yet, but if it does, it'll be a guy.
Kirishima was still nodding. Neat. Me too. I mean, not theoretical, but, guys. Katsuki side-eyed him.
I figured.
Kirishima looked like he was seriously considering bailing out into the street. Oh? He said, with impressively bad faked casualness.
Your idiots weren't very surprised about you getting a boyfriend,
Katsuki explained. That seemed to relax Kirishima a bit. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. He was still acting kind of weird, but Katsuki wasn't about to drag it out of him. Kirishima would talk when he wanted to, and if not, it wasn't Katsuki's fucking problem.
So how far's your house?
About 15 minutes from here. You can put on music or something if you want, Kirishima said, gesturing at the radio. Katsuki turned it on, flipped through every station he could find, got annoyed with all of them, and eventually just plugged in his phone and started playing his own music. Emo jokes be damned. Kirishima was still looking at the road, but he looked like he was fighting back a smile.
What's so fucking funny?
Nothing, he insisted. I just figured you would go for the aux first, is all.
Fuck you,
Katsuki said reflexively, making Kirishima's smile turn into a full-on laugh. Katsuki felt his ears heating up and attributed it to mounting frustration at the fact that no one took his insults seriously anymore, and the fact that it was about 30 degrees and muggy out. They didn't talk much until they pulled into the driveway of what Katsuki assumed was Kirishima's house. It was small and kind of scruffy looking, but the accents and door were painted in a bright, cheerful yellow, and the garden near the front porch looked well cared for. Kirishima was drumming his fingers nervously on the steering wheel, obvious in the now silent car.
Are we just going to sit here forever, or are we going to go inside?
Kirishima startled slightly and then nodded. Right, sorry, let's go. Katsuki picked up his bag and climbed out of the car, waiting for Kirishima before making his way towards the house. Kirishima opened the door and waved Katsuki inside, calling out "We're home," as he shut the door behind them. The house was blessedly cool after the oppressive heat outside, even if the entryway was small and he and Kirishima were kind of squished together. Katsuki managed to maneuver his way out of his shoes and into the small hallway leading away from the door so Kirishima had more room, and nearly bumped into a woman coming from the opposite direction. Katsuki assumed it was one of Kirishima's moms. She was tall, nearly Kirishima's height, with curly hair a few shades darker than her own son's. She was wearing wire-rimmed glasses, and she looked very normal, all things considered. It was a similar whiplash to when he'd met Ashido's dad. People this normal didn't seem like they should have neon-colored children. "Bakugou, I assume?" she said with a small smile.
Katsuki nodded. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Kirishima.
She waved him off. Please, there are 4 Kirishimas in this house. That's going to get confusing. Yuka is fine. Katsuki blinked a bit taken aback. Uraraka had been coming to his house since she was 5, and the idea of calling his mom Mitsuki made him vaguely nauseous. Then again, the Kirishima family seemed to be about as different from his as possible, so he'd deal. It was just for tonight anyway. Well, we've got a couple of hours until dinner, and I'm not going to force you to spend time with me before then. Just remember that the walls aren't very soundproof, okay, Eijirou? Eijirou's face went red so quickly that Katsuki was almost surprised he didn't pass out. Mama! Yuka laughed. Sorry, your mom put me up to it. She ruffled the front of Kirishima's hair to further protest, then disappeared back the way she came. Kirishima still kind of looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. You should know that it's just going to be more of that, Kirishima said, leading Katsuki down the hallway towards a set of stairs. And Sayuri's going to be even worse.
There really isn't anything to be embarrassed about. It's not like it's true,
Katsuki said with a shrug. Kirishima opened his mouth like he wanted to explain why this was, in fact, actually horrible, but he was interrupted by a new voice speaking from the top of the stairs.
Eh?
Kirishima's face immediately split into a wide grin. Hey, you're home early!
We had a half day,
the voice said, and when Kirishima stepped aside a bit, Katsuki found that it belonged to a girl of about 12 with jet black hair and almost impressive number of freckles. Right, I forgot. Anyway, Toshiko, this is my boyfriend, Bakugou. Bakugou, this is my little sister, Kirishima said, gesturing at each of them when he said their names. Katsuki nodded in greeting. Toshiko just studied him silently, slowly pulling the book up to her chest like a shield. He couldn't see the title, but he'd know the cover anywhere.
Is that from Winter the Nameless?
Katsuki asked, only partially of his own volition, pointing at the book. He'd been not obsessed with the series when he was younger. That implied way more investment in something other than school than he was willing to admit. But he definitely liked it, enough that he still had some parts of the earlier books memorized. Yeah, Toshiko said, all of her shyness vanishing instantly. She held out the book so Katsuki could see the cover. It was the 4th book, meaning Toshiko was 2/3 of the way through the series. You've read them?
A while ago,
Katsuki said, trying to sound dismissive. He suspected he failed because Toshiko narrowed her eyes at him. Kirishima made that same face whenever he thought Katsuki was being difficult. Favorite book?
The Scorpion Queen, obviously.
Book 6. The peak of fucking YA literature as far as Katsuki was concerned. Toshiko nodded, and it occurred to him that if she knew to agree, then she was probably rereading the series. Smart kid. Favorite character? His instinct was to respond with,
not fucking Ivana.
But the Kirishimas seemed like one of those families that frowned upon swearing in front of kids, so he said,
Stella.
Toshiko nodded again, and Katsuki wondered at what point his life had gotten so messed up that gaining the approval of a 12-year-old was something that brought him legitimate pride. Opinion on her kiss with Aiden in Crow's Blood?
A complete waste of time, used for forced tension between Stella and Winter.
Katsuki responded instantly. He had fucking opinions about that kiss. There was a reason Crow's Blood was his least favorite book in the series. Toshiko stared him down intensely, and Katsuki met her head on because he wasn't going to lose to a goddamn 12-year-old. Finally, she turned to Kirishima, who was trying and failing to fight back a grin. You can keep him, she declared, sliding past Kirishima in a direction Katsuki hadn't explored yet, submitting to a hair ruffle as she passed her brother. Dude, that was uncanny, Kirishima said with an exaggerated shudder. I swear, the first time she read the series, she came in my room and went on a 15-minute rant about that kiss.
I see who got the brains in the family,
Katsuki replied, ignoring Kirishima's wounded expression. I haven't even read the series, Kirishima complained. I don't have opinions to be wrong about.
Then get cracking, shark face. I don't want my only source of intelligent conversation in this house to be someone in middle school.
Kirishima gave him a deeply wounded look, but directed Katsuki up the stairs and towards his room anyway. Here we are, Kirishima said, coming to a stop in front of the door marked with the kanji for Eijirou.
Shit, I could have sworn yours was the one that said Toshiko on it.
Katsuki deadpanned, and Kirishima shoved him, then opened the door. Katsuki first thought that it was almost aggressively Kirishima. From the posters covering the walls to the punching bag to the camo bed sheets. His second was, what the fuck is that?
What the fuck is that?
What the fuck is... Oh, yeah. It was a present from Mina when we started high school.
Why?
Katsuki demanded, gesturing vehemently at the goddamn flexing clock. Hey man, I like it. It reminds me not to let go of myself, you know? He said, punching his fists together in front of his chest. It drew attention to the fact that he could probably crush the stupid clock with his bare hands if he chose to. Katsuki rolled his eyes.
Yeah, sure. It's still fucking hideous.
Kirishima shrugged. To each their own, right? I haven't said anything about your skull shirt.
What about it, shitty hair?
Katsuki asked, leveling Kirishima with a menacing look. I would definitely have worn it during my Evo phase. This sparked a heated debate about the aesthetic merit of skulls, which ended with them on the floor with Kirishima's laptop between them, watching some kind of sketch comedy clip. Katsuki had no idea how they'd gotten from point A to point B, but he did know that the coolness of the house that he'd appreciated when they first came in had gradually shifted into him being genuinely cold. He had goosebumps on his arms, and when he rubbed at them to try to warm up, Kirishima noticed and gave him a concerned look. You okay?
I'm fine,
Katsuki snapped defensively.
Your house is just fucking freezing.
Oh, shoot, sorry, Kirishima said, pausing the video and scrambling to his feet. We all run pretty warm, and it's cheaper anyway, so we keep it cold. You can borrow a sweater or something if you want.
I don't need your pity,
Katsuki grumbled, mostly out of habit. Unfortunately, the only thing he hated more than looking weak was being cold. So he was either going to have to ask for one anyway, or hope that Kirishima's particular brand of aggressive kindness extended to this too. It's not pity, dude. It's being a good friend. Hanta has, no insulation. I think he's worn most of my sweatshirts more often than I have, Kirishima said, rifling through one of the drawers of his desk until he found what he was looking for and pulled it out of the drawer. How's this one? It was, of course, bright fucking red, with a white cross and staff embroidered on the upper left side. Katsuki glared at it. Okay, taking that as a no, Kirishima said, undeterred. He continued to shift through the drawer until his face split into a scheming grin, and he pulled out a black hoodie with the MCR logo emblazoned across the front. More your speed? Kirishima asked innocently. Katsuki could tell he was making fun of him, which made him want to accept it out of spite, but it was clearly old, since it looked like 3 sizes too small for Kirishima, and therefore wouldn't fit Katsuki either.
Just give me the fucking lifeguard one,
Katsuki said peevishly, and Kirishima tossed it over, laughing. Katsuki pulled it on, muttering his plans for Kirishima's painful and violent death as he did. The hoodie was a size too big on him, which managed to be nice while also making him look indescribably furious. He had fucking sweater paws. It was undignified. Kirishima had made his way back to his spot on the floor while Katsuki was putting on the hoodie. Katsuki had expected him to start the video again, but instead he was giving Katsuki an indecipherable look.
What?
Katsuki snapped. That seemed to bring Kirishima back to reality. Your hair's all staticky, he said, rubbing at it with a shit-eating grin on his face. Katsuki swatted his hand away.
You, of all people, don't get to make fun of people's hair.
Hey, at least this is on purpose, Kirishima responded. Katsuki wanted to say that was worse, actually, but before he had the chance to verbally decimate Kirishima and his terrible style choices, there was a knock at the door. Hey, dinner's ready, Toshiko called from outside. Okay, we'll be down in a second, Kirishima replied, and Katsuki heard the sound of running feet in the hallway. You might want to hurry, Kirishima said, getting to his feet. Yuka made udon, and if we take too long, Toshi will eat all of it. Katsuki definitely didn't need to be told twice, and he followed Kirishima down the stairs and in the opposite direction of the front door. The house was open plan beyond the stairs, with the living room, dining room, and kitchen all next to each other, and not a wall between them. Yuka was in the kitchen, and Toshiko was helping a short woman with a bob, who Katsuki assumed was Kirishima's other mom, set the table. She looked up when she heard them coming, and grinned wildly when she set eyes on Katsuki. Ah, you must be the famous Bakugou, she said. Kirishima wilted beside him. Nice to finally meet you. I'm Sayuri. Vague memories of Thursday's lunch set off alarms in the back of Katsuki's head, but before he could respond to any of them, Sayuri nodded at him and said, "I like the sweater." Fuck, well, this was going to be interesting. "Mom," Kirishima begged from beside him, "please." "What? I think it was a good choice, Eijirou. It brings out his eyes." Yuka emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of bowls in her hand. "At least let them sit down, Sayuri," she scolded, setting a pot down in the center of the table and waving them over. Katsuki waited until Kirishima had picked somewhere to sit and sat down beside him, holding himself stiffly while the rest of the Kirishimas settled into their seats. Bowls were passed around, and once everyone had food in front of them, Kirishima took a bite, and Katsuki took that as permission to follow his lead. Kirishima hadn't lied. The food was good, and it took all the years his mother had spent trying to instill proper table manners in him for Katsuki to not scarf the entire bowl down in seconds. "No books at the table, Toshiko," Yuka admonished gently, the first thing anyone had said since the meal had started. Toshiko gently set her book down on the floor beside her. After that, there wasn't another second of silence. Sayuri asked about their days and seemed to expect a detailed answer from everyone, including Katsuki. It never went so far as the full-on interrogation he'd been expecting, and Yuka cheerfully redirected the conversation whenever it got close. But Sayuri asked about his classes, his plans after high school, how he got along with Kirishima's friends, and, eventually, "So how did you two meet? Eijirou has been very tight-lipped about the whole thing." Katsuki glanced over at Kirishima, who was staring into his nearly empty udon bowl like it held the secrets of the universe. Clearly, he wasn't going to be of any help.
"He was healing behind Kaminari's go-kart and he knocked into me,"
Katsuki said, and Kirishima let out a single pained whimper. Sayuri, to his shock, just started laughing, so hard she gave herself hiccups. Yuka just shook her head with a small sigh. "Well, that's certainly in character." Toshiko sat up straighter, grinning. "He jumped off a roof once." Katsuki shot Kirishima a look. "It was into a lake," Kirishima explained quickly. Unfortunately for him, Toshiko's comment seemed to have unlocked Pandora's box of embarrassing childhood stories, which Kirishima submitted to with only occasional defensive comments. Until Sayuri tried to take out a photo album, at which point Kirishima shot to his feet with a, "Well, would you look at the time?" and yanked on Katsuki's elbow until he got the hint and stood up as well.
"Thank you for having me,"
he said, inclining his head slightly. "Of course," Sayuri said brightly. "You're welcome back any time." Kirishima's grip on his arm seemed to relax a bit at that, but he continued to herd Katsuki gently towards the door. "Sorry about that," Kirishima said once they were settled in the car again.
"Are you kidding me? That was fucking awesome,"
Katsuki replied.
"I have enough blackmail material on you to last a lifetime."
Kirishima sputtered indignantly. "Dude!"
"The morons are gonna have a fucking field day with all of this,"
Katsuki said, watching smugly as all the blood drained from Kirishima's face. "You wouldn't."
"Oh, I absolutely fucking would."
They bickered back and forth until they arrived at Katsuki's house. All the lights were off, which was a bit unusual, but then he remembered that his parents were out at some dinner thing for work, which, yes, meant he could have just stayed home and spent the exact same amount of time without his parents, but somehow he couldn't bring himself to regret it.
"Bye, shitty hair,"
Katsuki said, climbing out of the car and starting off towards the house. Kirishima called something out that he didn't hear and waited in the driveway until Katsuki had gotten the door unlocked and made it inside. Katsuki took off his shoes and headed up to his room to change out of his uniform. It wasn't until he was pulling out his pajamas that he realized he was still wearing Kirishima's hoodie. All right, friends. Thank you so much for joining me for Chapter 5. I hope you enjoyed this chapter and enjoyed getting to see them have dinner together. I think it's so cute, and I love this family dynamic that wrunic has made for this family. I think it's super cute. I hope that you will come back and join us for the next piece. The next part is chapter 6, and if you do, I'll see you next time.